All right, John. So, why don't you start by introducing yourself? Tell us who we're talking to and how you came to be here with us today.
So my name is John Jennison. I am an illustrator. I do mostly comic books and like storytelling through pictorial images. I recently completed a queer masculine energy major arcana tarot deck. And I think that this would have been my third year at the New York Queer Art Festival or Art Fair. Unfortunately, we didn't have it, but I did set up my table, so it's very much like. I don't think you can really see it the way that my camera is set up. I can't angle it, so I brought all of the things that I would have had at the fair, just as kind of like fun reference. And I even made this banner that would have been behind my table, and I was like, "What am I going to use it for?" So I'll put it up today and have it as my backdrop.
I like this. We're turning our interviews into a virtual fair. That's fun, and it's not what you would have done. It's what we're going to do when we are free and this is over. So it's still going to happen, I believe.
No, absolutely. But I mean, it would have happened April. What was it? April 11th? Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Saturday and Sunday in April 11th and 12th, I think. Yep.
But that's okay. We'll go for the fall, right? That's what everybody's doing now.
Hey,
Summer's canceled.
Okay, well, you told us you just finished the masculine energy tarot deck. So since that's what you brought up, let's go ahead and start there. Talk to us a little bit, or if you'd rather, we can start with the comic. We can go in either direction. We
can start with the tarot deck. So I just finished. I did a Kickstarter for the Mystic Male Tarot, and then this is images. Let's see if I can of some of the cards here. I'll just kind of like flip through them while I talk about it. So essentially, I started reading tarot in high school. The mother of my mom's boyfriend at the time gave me a deck, and I got really into just like the pictures. I was never really a strong reader, and I mostly would use them like ideas for comics.
Okay.
The thing I love about tarot cards is when you do a spread, it lays out panels kind of like a comic book, and you have the gutters, which is what you fill in between with your ideas based on the cards and what they've represented throughout time. So that was kind of something that I personally focus on. And then I kind of gave up tarot reading when I entered college, and it didn't really come back into my life until I was around 31. Mm-hmm. I had recently been diagnosed with neuroendocrine cancer, and I was visiting my mom after surgery, and I found that original deck, and I decided to bring it back to New York with me. And I started doing a little bit more research into it and reading for myself quite a bit. I also found that there were just tons of different types of tarot decks, which was something that I had never really experienced. And I went out and I bought, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was that a Rider-Waite that you started with?
No, it was the Marsalis.
Yep.
Yeah. And the court cards and the minor arcana were just not really good for like intuitive reading. And so I picked up a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and that's when I really just started to kind of click, and I read for myself a lot more. And then, I just kind of, it was always in the background. And then a couple of years ago, I was doing Inktober, and I started doing a Major Arcana deck, which is where the Mystic Male Tarot kind of started. And then I worked on that for about 2.5 years before finishing it. So I have that. But I think that like my journey towards the tarot kind of went more with like my own kind of like journey with comics. So I started
Mm-hmm.
making zines around the same time as getting back into tarot. Um, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I started making kind of like journal comics and zines, and they would talk about my treatments, just different appointments, feelings that I was having, and I did those for about 3 years, and then it kind of evolved into doing some web work, and then I realized like a lot of what I was doing was like horror, like the creatures that I was creating in my comic. The I had like a tumor monster that I would have conversations with, and so I really just started researching and going back and diving into like all of the old horror that I loved as a child. And I started doing some more like creature feature style comics, and then I realized like there's no really real queer stuff, and the stuff that, or whenever a queer person is mentioned in like the old 60s and 70s horror comics, it's like the hairdresser. So I wanted to create stories that included queer characters as both villain and hero, and that's when I did the Closet of Secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Is this here? But yeah, I mean, I also like I was a huge Sandman fan, so I did one of the things I did for the first queer comic fairs was this, which is a zine, Endless Summer. It's based on the Sandman series because I was
Oh
a
yeah.
huge 90s Sandman fan, and it's a coloring book with just different characters from the Sandman. Let me see if I can. My favorite is Despair and Delirium. That light is terrible. Sorry, my window is, the sun is setting perfectly too.
No, I can see it. It's great.
Yeah, and then it was around the time that they were announcing the 30th anniversary, so they were introducing new characters, and I added some of those new characters to the book to be inclusive. So yeah, so that's a little bit about the comics, about the tarot, but like I've done a lot of, like I do a lot of projects. Like I edited a book for Geeks Out,
Mm-hmm.
which was like a power anthology, and I illustrated the cover, but I don't have a piece in the book because I was too busy going through everybody else's work. But it was a lot of fun, and this was really my first experience. This was back in 2015 of putting together something that was not quite a zine.
Yep.
And it's a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and I met a lot of really great people doing it. So
I think that's one of the best things about these fairs and the anthology that we started as part of the fair this year is the way we get to bring artists together so that they can meet not only the people who want and need their work, but also the other people who are creating from similar spaces that they are. So yeah, I think that's it's powerful to edit other people's work and to be behind bringing them together and representing them. Good stuff. So do you still see your work as a way of processing out feelings, or as you got to a better place with your cancer, did that kind of drop away? Where are the narratives now?
I think that is always something that is underlying in the works that I do. I think that all of my art has some representation of the internal struggles that I have with cancer. I think that's an interesting. It's an interesting question. Like. Because I don't think that it's the main focus, but I definitely think that it is always in the background when I am working on things. And I think that it has to do with how you create like an emotional resonance with your viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So there are definitely still aspects of it, and I do still work on stories about cancer. I have a piece that I've been working on for about 2000. I started in 2016, and it's about a young boy who, right before graduation, finds out that he has cancer, and it's basically just kind of that the idea of like deviating from your path and like having to change your life goals at key moments, or what are seen as key moments in adolescence. Um, so yes, they are still underlying, and I think like in my horror, when I think of like monsters and stuff, that is like cancer is always one of those things that kind of comes back. I'm trying to think if it's in any of the stories that I did. I think I pull a lot of my own personal experience when I write, and especially the queer horror stories. So in the first issue of Closet of Secrets, there's a story, and it's called Love Afterlife, and it's a zombie story about two young boys who go into the woods to cast a spell to find their true love. And what happens is kind of a comedy of errors where they accidentally raise a zombie who was a World War II hero. And he tells the story of unrequited love with a member of his platoon, and how he commits suicide after finding out that that man had been murdered. And in the end of the story, the boys kind of like realize that they love each other, and so their spell works. But the idea behind that story of the World War II veteran was, when I was in college, my grandmother took me to lunch after I graduated, and she's extremely Catholic. I'd not come out to her, and she kind of sat me down and was just like, she told me this story about my grandfather and how after the war, he had a platoon mate who had like invited him to lunch. He was in town, and he, like, my grandfather showed up, and the gentleman had made like a picnic dinner or picnic lunch and like spread it all out. And he, in some way, shape, or form, essentially confessed his love to my grandfather. And my grandmother was very like, my grandmother said that my grandfather was very gracious about alive.
Yes. Okay. I don't know what happened. I got a poor internet connection message. Part of our new digital world. I hate to make you go back, but I heard the beginning of a very interesting story, and I want the whole thing. So if you don't mind, could you go back to having lunch with your grandmother and the story of your grandfather meeting a friend from the armed forces?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, it's funny because like as I was telling it, it was making me all. So hopefully I don't do that again, because I love my Nana.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So essentially, after I graduated from college, and I was not out to my grandmother. I was out to the majority of my family, but not her because of her Catholic lifestyle. We sat down, and she told me the story of how after the war, my grandfather had been invited by one of his platoon mates to for lunch or whatever. And he met up with him, and the gentleman had made like a nice picnic set up, kind of like romantic, weird at that time period, and confessed in some way, shape, or form his feelings towards my grandfather. And my grandmother told me, was very gracious, said like, this isn't my lifestyle, I'm married, I have a wife, but like, go your own way, and no fault to you. And then like my grandmother telling me this story, I kind of was like, I knew that she knew that I was gay. And when she finished telling me the story, she just basically said, I just want you to be careful in life and what you do, because people will hurt you. And that was kind of where the story. Did I talk about? I forget which order. I talked about the zombie part first, right? So that aspect of the story was there. Did I lose you again? Am I still on? But yeah, so I guess it looks like I'm still live. I see you, you're waving. So I'm not really sure. But yeah, so essentially, like, that was where the story Love After Life came from, was sitting with my grandmother and having that conversation. And I wanted to draw that inspiration from my my own personal experiences. And like that was kind of, as far as like talking about cancer and talking about like other aspects of my life, like I try and draw inspiration from everything, and they always seep into my stories in some way, shape, or form. So I guess that's kind of talks about my horror stuff. And I've actually been working on a lot of horror things, and I will show them. So just so you're aware, I can't hear you. So if you want to type questions to me, or I'll just like blab. But I'm working on right now. Let me put these in some form of order because they're a little bit messy. I'm working on another short horror story that is based on. It's very loosely based on Matthew Shepard. And so this is the first inked page here, and I'll just kind of like scroll it up because the pages are bigger than the screen. And I've been working on this. This was actually what I was planning on. If we ran out of things to show and tell, I would ink some of this while chatting with you all. So here is the second page, and it's basically three kind of predatory straight men approaching the local queer kid at the bar, feeling threatened by him, and ending up attacking him. So that's like the basic gist of it. And then the next page, which is not inked but penciled, so you can kind of see what my pencils look like before I ink them. I do a lot of the detail work when I ink because I'm doing my own inking. I don't have to be quite as detailed with the pencils, and I can go in and kind of play with it after the fact. So yeah, there's that. And I guess like I get to show a couple of other things that I have been working on. So last year I did a short story for Rainbow Reflections, which is a anthology that was put out by Queen's College in Canada, or Queen's University, I believe, sorry. And it's body image comics for queer men, and I did a short story that was, again, based on my own personal experience of body image issues after I had surgery. I had a huge scar on my stomach, and so the story that I told in that piece was called Scar Tissue, and it's about just the unrealistic ideals that the queer male community puts on their sexual partners. And you can pick that up. I think that it's available online. I'm not sure that I can post the link on my Instagram so that people can get it because I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. But here too, since I have the Instagram, Facebook feed going also. Yeah. Talk about, I have stickers of dinosaurs, and I love to put dinosaurs in fun and interesting costumes and whatnot. I did a coloring book back in 2010 that was, if dinosaurs were sexy, they wouldn't be extinct. And it is, unfortunately, I don't have any copies of that here, but they were burlesque dinosaurs. And I have a sticker that is based off of one of those. And it is a sexy pole dancing triceratops here. And I have Thanosaurus Rex, and these will be available on my website at some point. I also, for the Queer Comic Fair, printed these kind of sexy androgynous holofoil stickers that are kind of fun, and I enjoyed them. I am currently working on getting ahead of myself for. Hello.
Hey, John, I am so sorry. So we're on the third device here trying to make this work. It looked like you were doing beautifully interviewing yourself. I deeply apologize. Okay, I saw some. I heard the end of a story. You don't need to catch me up. I'll learn. You were showing some. You were showing some stickers. The last I saw, and I'll let you wrap up what you wanted to say there, and then I'll try to dive back in and hope I'm not asking you things you already talked about.
No. I mean, it's okay. I just it looked. I was still seeing the feed come through of like people talking, so I was like, well, I guess I'll just keep talking, and maybe it'll catch up with itself. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. No, I was just saying that these were things that I had printed for the fair, which we will have available soon, and they're also available on my website. So I have one of my favorites, which is an oldie but a goodie.
Cherry!
And it says "sit on my face." We can't really see it, but I always, like, even as a kid, I thought that was like the weirdest thing. Like, why would a chair talk, and why would its mouth be like where your butt's gonna go? So yeah, and then I do a lot of coloring books. That was what I was saying. I did the dinosaurs are sexy, they wouldn't be extinct. I had a couple of like dirty boys. I did a coloring book for the Mystic Male Tarot that was available on Kickstarter. Yeah, okay. Now let's see what I missed.
Okay, so in grad school, I wrote about gender nonconforming people in horror films. I started with Psycho, and I went to the present. I personally think there's a deep connection that a lot of queer people have with the horror genre, and you talked about some specific ways in which you reinterpreted your life into horror. But what drew you to horror, and why is it the medium that you feel like best expresses your message as a queer man?
I think that the simplest answer to that is that horror is always easy to relate to. Everybody has been scared at some point in their life. There's some aspect of any situation that you can find something frightening in, I think, whether it's just like public speaking or going live on Instagram. You can take those and you can kind of create analogies or stories in any way, shape, or form. But I think that, like, as far as queer horror goes, it's always the idea of the other, and like uh, it's the thing that is different that is always or in the 80s when I was growing up was always like projected as the scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I feel like I think I'm trying to remember. I think that the first movie that I saw where I really kind of felt the queer tinge was Gremlins.
Interesting.
And I can't remember the main character's name off the top of my head. Was it Billy? Billy's relationship with Gizmo, this strange little creature that had so much potential to create and cause fear. And uh, he did so easily by getting wet or eating after midnight. And I always found that kind of fascinating. I don't know. I think that it's also the idea of having to hide yourself in the shadows, or at least not so much. I feel like it's getting better now, but when I was growing up, like it took a long time before I felt comfortable coming out, and I know that a lot of other people felt the same way and still feel the same way. I don't want to disregard that. So I think that horror is a genre that it's easy to lose yourself in as a queer person.
I think that's fair. I definitely like my parents were big horror fans, and they never really prevented me from watching horror movies. So I was always, as a very young child, like watching horror with them. And I remember this identification with the monsters on some level, because the monsters are often involved in some sort of like queer relationship with someone else. I was like 10ish when the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula came out, which is very queer, and really predicated on this kind of fear of AIDS, HIV and AIDS. So I'm curious, what things do you turn into your monsters? Because you're working in a genre that has often depicted us as monstrous, queer people as monstrous. And I know you have your tumor monster, which I find really compelling. The zombie in the forest with the two boys, who's not really a monster, I think is interesting. So what are the scare factors, the fear factors, in your horror comics?
So I think that it's interesting because one of the things that I've been struggling with is to try and not make my horror or my queer horror like anti-straight propaganda, because it's very easy to do. And I think it's that fear. It's what I think that the thing that I work most, it's those little moments. I like to try and take those little tiny fears that you have and create those into monsters. Like another story in The Closet of Secrets is about a young girl whose conservative father comes home and catches her kissing another girl.
Mm-hmm.
And she runs away, and while she's outside in the woods, she sees an undertaker dragging a coffin. And she's yelling to him and screaming to him, and he's ignoring her. And he drops the coffin and walks away. And she walks up to the coffin, and when she opens it, spoiler alert, it's her own body in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of that book was kind of, or that story was kind of what the girl is clutching, or what the dead girl is clutching in her hand, is a note that says, "Don't go home." And it leaves the story, I specifically left the story ambiguous as to was the girl dead? Did the girl run away? What is this body? Is this body like an alternate dimension? And it's the idea that like we hear a lot of stories where the parents come around, and wanted to create a story where it's very obvious that the parent didn't come around, and sometimes you're not safe and you need to seek out help from outside sources and outside family, and create your own kind of chosen family. So I think that it's a lot of just like small internal thoughts that I want to create into monsters. I also just love to play with classic monsters. The series that I'm working on right now, there's a werewolf story, and then I'm working on 3 mummy stories, just because I find homosexuality in ancient Egypt fascinating, and something that's never really touched upon in horror comics. But again, some of the stuff that I've come across, or like some of the ideas that I've come up with are, I don't want them to just be a gay telling of like a straight story. There has to be a purpose for it. And I don't want it to necessarily be like the curse of Tutankhamun because he was in love with a man, which is still, I think, something that needs to be represented, but it's finding those little tiny twists in it to make it more compelling.
I like thinking about your story with the queer girl and the kiss. I really find it interesting or compelling, like this notion of maybe a horror where there isn't a monster that's easily identifiable. And I think just from what you told me of that story, I think that would definitely be an example of that, where it's almost Hitchcock, right? Like the violence doesn't happen on stage. There's nothing to make you squeamish necessarily, except, possibly a corpse. But what has happened is unclear, and it's the fear resides in that lack of clarity. I think that's quite powerful.
Yeah, for me, I've never been a gore person.
Yep.
And I, like, going back to my childhood, a lot of my sister and my cousins would force me to watch these like terrible horror movies. I remember sitting through the first Child's Play and just like trying not to cry at 10 years old, because just like some of the disgusting things that I was seeing. And like I like what's hiding in the shadows scares much more than the heart being ripped out or like somebody being disemboweled. And I think that is an important aspect in queer horror also, because it is more of the psychological, what could happen or what is about to happen, fear.
Well, that's the fear of the closet, right? That's
right.
The fear of living in the closet is what's going to happen, who's going to out me, who's going to know. And it's a long lingering spirit that stays with you even after you come out of the closet.
I love the idea of just talking about creating monsters, a monster that outs people.
Oh,
just like some creature that just like slithers out of a closet. And I'm making a note of that one for later. I'm stealing your idea.
It's wonderful. I love that. I want to read that. So we're going way back to before the connection broke twice. So I'm thinking about your tarot now in the context of your greater horror experience, and the association that the tarot has with the occult. Well, I mean, I guess it's not an association. But how have these things that are outside of what people consider like appropriate, essentially queer genres and queer objects, helped you to excise those closet monsters and the tumor monster. How are you using these as specific tools to, like I said, to exercise those spirits?
It's interesting because I never really saw myself as a spiritual person, and I still don't necessarily see tarot as. I see the spiritual aspect, but I don't always see it as. I'm not communicating with spirits necessarily, but I do think that you're communicating with the past through symbols that have been representative for thousands of years, and what those symbols have evolved to mean and to be and to invoke in your mind when you see them. And I think that like those things from a queer aspect are there's a lot of like hidden meaning in things that we're now more familiar with, but when you think back 100, 200 years ago, they may have been like little hidden messages kind of amongst friends, you know, like little coded issues, or coded not coded issues, coded ideas. And so for me, using tarot was more about, I was trying to explore just all aspects of myself. I needed guidance that I wasn't finding from friends or family. I was going through a situation where there is so much uncertainty. And so to have these cards kind of lay out steps that I needed to take, or steps that if I took, this could be the potential outcome, was fascinating to me. And that's not necessarily as a queer person, that's just in general. And I think that everybody, I think that if you can't afford therapy, buying a copy of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the best thing that you can do for yourself, and just starting a practice, because even if you never look at the guidebook, you see images and they're going to invoke something in you that is in regards to your situation. They're going to make you see your question in a different way. And that's kind of what I think is important and fascinating about tarot, is it's a different way of thinking about what your query is. I know that a lot of times when I'm struggling, I'll pull a card that's the exact opposite of what I think I need to be doing. And then I'll sit down and I'll just write about that, and why that might work better than the way I've been doing it, or the way I plan to do something. And 9 times out of 10, it usually is helpful, even if I don't go the route that the tarot cards tell me to go.
So you're really using it as a psychological device to kind of make a break with kind of habits of pattern and thought.
Yeah, I am a creature of habit. Like I have a very hard time getting out of bad patterns, and tarot was a thing that helped me really get back in and focus on creating my work. I kind of let it fall astray, and when I started reading more for myself, it pushed me to create comics, because I think that the interesting thing about the thing that makes me the saddest that we weren't able to have the fair in April is that as artists, we are kind of in this solitary, we're always in a solitary state when we're creating. And then we get to go to these events and really just like put forward our soul, put forward our children to show the world. And that's the time where we get to really shine and enjoy the community aspect of it, which is why I'm finding a lot of people that I talk to who are artists tend to be having an easier time in quarantine. I don't know if this is your experience, but this has definitely been my experience. Like, I feel like I'm thriving because I can sit down and draw for 8 hours, and it's like nothing is past. I'm not worried about the outside world. I don't have to think about what event I should be going to that I'm trying to plan an excuse to not go to. And so I think that is another like really interesting thing that's happening right now. I don't know. I'm curious if you feel that way.
I actually feel exactly the same way. I told my partner that quarantine was so nice because I couldn't do anything. Like it was such a relief to know like I can't help if I want to. I can't say yes if I want to.
Yeah.
Like all I can do is the work I want to do. And it was such a relief. I'm sure before it's all over and done with, I'll hate it and be crawling the walls. But right now, I like even the small things that I have to do outside of my work. I'm like, just let me back at my work. Just let me back at my art.
Yeah.
No, very, very much the same thing. And I think James up there says he was feeling the same way. James Dillenbeck.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's got it. James, I don't know if anybody follows him. If you're not following James, you should. But just watching him in his like wooded area with his 2 beautiful dogs, I'm like so jealous that I'm stuck in New York, because at least he gets that outdoor experience that's very hard to have right now.
Yes.
Because I think in about a month, when it's really nice, and if we are still in this state, hopefully we won't be, but I've got a feeling that there will be some form of it. It will be hard to not be outside and not be at the parks and playing and running around with the dog and all of that. I do miss, there are people that I miss, but we have FaceTime, which is what
I know, and it's funny. I actually find myself, I don't know about you, but I find myself connecting with people I wouldn't normally connect with because of the new medium of having to use Zoom and Instagram Live and things. We probably, like, this conversation wouldn't have happened this way if we hadn't have been stuck in quarantine. So I find these little changes quite interesting.
No, absolutely. I'm fascinated for the record of this time period, because I think that we're going to have a lot of like great media to look back at and to see, like, while we all felt that we were suffering, people were making some wonderful things. People were finding creative and new ways to do things. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is there are a lot of virtual life drawing sessions.
Yes.
Like Doable Guys, who I know was going to be at the fair. But then because I did Doable Guys one week, I met, I think it's Gay Chicago Drink and Draw. And they had a drink and draw last weekend that I got to go to, and that was really cool. There's one, I got an email from somebody that's in London, and it was actually happening during this filming, or else I would have joined them. But I plan to go next week. Like, I think that we're going to find new ways to connect with people around the world in a very interesting way after all of this. Yeah, but on that note, there's something I want to plug, because if you could see my shirt, I do event coordination at Anyone Comics, and we are doing a virtual life drawing tomorrow night that if you look on my page, it gives you the information on how to get a ticket for it. It's going to be over Zoom. We have a Wolverine model, and for those of you who are familiar with Marvel's Wolverine comics, Adam Kubert is going to be one of the guest artists, and he has graciously offered to donate the sketches that he does to the shop, and we're going to figure out some way to use those to raise funds for them while their doors are shut. So if you want to draw and like comic books, that will be something fun to do tomorrow night from 6 to 8.
6 to 8. All right, I will put the information up on the NYC Queer Comic Fair page as well.
Thank you.
Just tag me in it. I'll reshare it. As part of your plug, don't you have a drink and draw as well? No?
Well, yes, I host Drink and Draw at Anyone Comics normally.
Okay.
But they usually let us have the space, and our model for this is donating his fee. I'm donating all of the funds. The only money that we're taking is to pay for the Zoom account.
Okay.
And everything else is going directly to help them cover their rent, just because the state of comic books is a very scary place right now. Like Marvel, DC, I think DC is finally putting books out, but a lot of companies like Diamond shut down, and there have been no new comics for the entire month of April.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a rough patch, and these small businesses, it's a shame because they're not getting the help that they should be from our government. All that money is going to, that's another story. But we're going to try. I think that is the plight of the artists, is that we always get kind of pinned to help people. When tragedy strikes, it's like we're the ones raising money. I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, it's all of these comic book artists are donating art and auctioning it to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And it's a shame that it has to come to that, and that so many of these small businesses are just they're on the edge, that being closed for 1 month kills their business completely. So, and not that Anyone Comics is one of those places, but we don't want them to get to that point.
Yeah. I think you're doing great work helping them out. We need them, and they need us. We need places to put our art in the world, and I know there are several small comic shops, mostly in the village, where I put my things out that I'm worried about, and other bookstores who've always been supporters of me. So yeah, I appreciate you doing that. I think one thing that we're going to have a year from now, because of this, is a lack of reality television, because all of the shows will have been interrupted by quarantine. So I think that we'll have, like, there just won't be reality TV for a year, and I think that's great. That's off topic. That's not about you, and it's not about you.
I love that though. But here's the thing. This is the most reality TV you're gonna get. Like right now, everybody, the number of people that I see on Facebook Live, the drag queens, the burlesque performers, the DJs, like that's what reality TV is. And now it's gonna be, even when reality shows come back, they're gonna have to find a whole new formula and format to kind of like feed that. I thought this when I watched SNL. I don't know if you saw the live SNL, but it was fascinating to see just how innovative people are when they're given a challenge. And I think like it's going to fall on us. It's going to fall on the artists. It's going to fall on the writers, the illustrators, the television producers, the directors, the cinematographers to like really like step up and push forward after this. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that until you said it, but it's no reality TV for a year. I like that.
The other possibility is that they actually do the shows and show them going into quarantine, but I think we're all going to have like quarantine PTSD and not going to want to watch that.
Yeah. So, have you seen The Circle on Netflix?
Yeah, the horror film.
No. It's Netflix's first reality TV show.
Oh no, I haven't.
I would say that it is the closest thing to what we're living right now. It's essentially 8 people. They're put in a building. They each have their own apartment, and
Yeah.
they can't leave the apartment. They can only interact with people via social media. So it's IM. They can post limited pictures of themselves, but they can't have video chats because you're not supposed to know who the other people are. It's fascinating, and I'm not a reality TV person, but I watched this from start to finish, and it reminded me of The Real World season 3.
Huh.
In a way that it was like innovative. It felt new. It felt like a fresh take on reality television. You hate everybody on the show, but you also are kind of rooting for all of them. So,
isn't that all reality shows?
yes, absolutely. No, I hate everybody on most of them.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. I'm going to try and edit together these 3 different pieces of the interview. I'm sorry about the internet breaking, but I think we pulled it off. It was such a joy. You're such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for putting together the fair. It's been so much fun every time I've been, and I hope that everybody gets to come and enjoy it soon. And also, I'm excited for your project that's coming out too, right? Your Kickstarter stuff is...
Yes. So the anthology for the fair came in yesterday and today in 2 big boxes. They look good. They're taking up a ton of room, so I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna ship them without going to the post office. And I keep getting, Jack Kerouac said he just runs from one shooting star to another, and that's kind of how I live my life. So I kind of get distracted. I need to make the final proofs on the last 2 Wabi Sabi Zines books and send those to the printers as well. But they're done. I just need to check the registration and all the editing one last time, so I feel secure. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, because I saw the proof of the zine for the fair, and it's amazing. There's so many good artists. Are you going to be selling those online, or was it just through the Kickstarter?
So I don't know. I feel like I need to talk to the artists and see what they feel comfortable with. I don't feel comfortable making money off of it, and the fair doesn't make any money. So I have to figure out how, if it did make money, how would I manage that in a way that doesn't make me crazy. I obviously want as many people as possible to get access to everyone's art. That's the whole point. So I definitely plan on selling them at the fair, but I would need, I don't know, there's definitely some thought that I need to do there to figure out exactly how. And I really want to make sure all the artists who contributed, which is like 75, which is both exciting and intimidating. I really would have to make sure they were all on board before I did that. I mean, it was supposed to be a hand stapled zine, and I just kept getting more art, and I didn't want to say no. Like, yeah. I wanted to include every person who wanted to be included. That was my goal. It's always my goal. With every piece I got, I just was like, okay, all right, well, now it's 100 pages. Maybe I can still staple this. And then I was like, you know what? I can't staple it. So
it would have cost you more to do that yourself, though. Like,
oh yes,
you get to book that size. How many did you end up printing?
100.
Okay.
Yeah, someone bought 40.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that was really, really nice. A nonprofit bought 40, and I was super thrilled. They were so kind to want to support us in that way. So yeah, and they put one of their artists that they support in there, and they wanted to make sure that they had copies. So it was quite a I don't like the word blessing, so insert whatever word you like better than blessing. I can't think of one. So it was nice. It was very great.
Great. Well, congratulations, and congratulations on all that you do. I think that the fair is very important, and it's a great time every year. And every year I meet new people and have a great experience. So I hope that it continues for many years to come.
Me too. It's a blast for us. Yeah, this is so much fun. I'm so glad. I'm really glad that I'm getting to do these interviews with you guys. And my plug, I do have another one tomorrow. If you're not going to the Drink and Draw to support Anyone Comics, please stop by and see Not Pat Riley. He is a co-organizer of the fair and a wonderful, crazy human being. So, John, thank you again. I'm super looking forward to the Mystic Male Tarot. I'm ready for it.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you again for everything that you do, and thanks for everybody who came and watched us.
All right. Bye, all.
Bye.